I introduced a number of light properties in the previous lesson. In this one, we're going to adjust and animate some of those properties. To follow along, go to Working Files, After Effects Projects, and open up 1902 Lights Animation. Here you have this project with 4 lights already in it. Let's just take a look at the ambient light for a second. When you turn the ambient light on, it overrides the default settings, the actual original luminosity of the images, and then creates its own level of light. And sometimes you can turn it down or turn it up. At any rate, this is its effect. And lots of times I use the ambient light as a way to kind of lightly illuminate the scene while I work with other lights, because sometimes when you turn the lights on or off or change their properties, everything goes dark. So if you have the ambient light there, it's kind of your fallback just to kind of see how things are going to work. And then later on, you turn it off. It's also sometimes nice to have the ambient light just on under things even after you complete your work, because it does lightly illuminate the scene if that's your goal. If you look at some of the properties here, you're going to see only 2, intensity and color. And you can keyframe these things. You can have the color change over time, for example. So we'll just turn on color here. Instead of white, we'll go with something like maybe a deeper yellow like that. That could be the start. And you go inside your little ways, and you could change that color to something else. You can even change it to something distinctly different, like blue. And in the meantime, you can change the intensity as well to bring that up as you go through there. You could go from, let's say, fall to winter or something like that. All right, I'm going to go back to the light color we started with by doing Control-Command-Z a couple of times here, and there we go. All right, let's move on down the line here. I'm going to turn ambient off for now, but we're going to come back to it in a little while. Let's go to parallel. Now, parallel is a light that I hardly ever use, and I think most people hardly ever use it as well. It's just one of those odd little lights that just seems to be kind of hard to really grasp and really understand of its value. But I think for me, it's nice to kind of backlight things with the ambient light. It just kind of gives it a little bit of a glow around there and actually can throw a shadow that's equal to the color of the object forward. I think it's a good way to do it, and you might want to try that if you're working on parallel light. Let's just open it up and take a look at its properties. There is the fall-off distance and radius. And the fall-off distance and radius, what's the difference? The radius basically is where the fall-off starts. So some number of pixels out there, it begins. And this is how long it lasts. But with this particular light, you can hardly tell the fall-off distance. It just isn't that obvious. But the fall-off radius is pretty clear. If I were to change this, bring it up or something, it'll obviously increase the brightness there. If I drop it down, you'll see that it drops the area that's illuminated as well, something like that. But the fall-off distance is not so obvious with this particular light. One thing you can do, though, is you can animate its position and its point of interest. So let's close this down like this. And go P for position. And we're talking about the point of interest, so it's Shift-A to add that. Point of interest takes on the role of anchor when you are talking about shortcuts here, when you're working with the lights. Let's just see how that works. If I take the point of interest and keyframe that, and position and keyframe that, I'm going to pull this over a little bit on this side and press Control or Command minus to see what that is. There is the parallel light. You can tell it's a parallel light because it has those parallel lines. I'll click on it and you'll be able to see that more clearly. If I go over here, take the hand tool on this side, move it over. There it is as well. And there's the point of interest. Now, where's the text? Well, the text is buried under the layer. So let's bring it forward like this. Then we can take the point of interest across the text. I can grab the point of interest and move it left and right, for example. There you go. So it moves across. Since we keyframed it, it's going to try to find a new position here. There you go. Let's say I want to move the light itself. Now, if I have a direction selected, like Y, like that, if I just start pulling it down, it pulls the point of interest with it. Not necessarily what you want. Look how the point of interest is changing there in the numbers down there over the layer. If you don't want the point of interest to move when you move the light, hold down the Control or Command key, and then the point of interest stays put. Notice that the numbers are not changing now. This is very effective if you want to have, let's say, shadows falling across something like this. Look how they're going across the trees there in both of those views. So if you want the point of interest to stay put while you move one of these axes, then hold down the Control or Command key. If you don't see a letter X, Y, or Z, you just have that little highlight like that. When you grab it now, the point of interest will not move as well. It stays put. But if you grab one of the letters like that, then the point of interest moves with the whole thing like that. Okay, that's the parallel light. We'll turn that one off, and that's one you probably won't use that often. Point light is something you definitely will use. It just illuminates things from a spot. It's like this little light bulb floating around in space. Light dissipates from it as if it were the center of a sphere. It just dissipates throughout the sphere. It's not just forward or backwards. It just radiates away from that light wherever it is. So notice right now the shadows are falling on the trees. So let me open this up and show you the position. And this time there is no point of interest. If I open up all the way to look at all the transform properties here, it's just position. There is no point of interest because it's glowing everywhere. You can't point it at something. But if I want to change the position, though, it does throw the shadows off in a different way. Let's just go over here for a second and keyframe position there. Text just beginning to come up there. Let's let it come up for a while. The text is coming up, throwing the shadows there. I'll just duplicate that keyframe. Go forward a little bit now. Let's lift it up. Starts down low, and the light climbs up in the air, and you can watch that path right there. There we go. And so the shadows do move around. There is no point of interest, but you can still control the shadows. Now, I'm talking about shadows as if you know how to do shadows. We haven't really discussed the methodology to create shadows, and we're going to do that in the next lesson. But I have shadows turned on here, and I have these things back there with the ability to have shadows thrown on them. We'll talk about that little process, though, in the next lesson. All right, let's just turn off point for the time being and go on down here a little bit farther to Spotlight. Now, Spotlight is the one that just has the most cool things, has the most possibilities. Now that I've turned it on, where's everybody gone? Oh no, that's because the Spotlight is kind of a low intensity at this point. Here, you just barely see it. So if you want to see the effect of the Spotlight and also see what things are illuminated or can be illuminated, this is when you might want to turn on the ambient light a little bit just so you can see what's going on in the background. So I'll turn on the ambient light. Now you can see the effect of the Spotlight there and still see what's going on. So I've got the Spotlight here. What I'd like to do is have it point right down there at the text when it just starts appearing. So you click on the Spotlight and you can see its controls. It's got all this great stuff. It's got this cone, and it's got this point of interest, and it has the usual controls over here. So the first order of business is to get this thing down to the text. So I'm going to bring it down by clicking on the Y and then letting it come down because I want the point of interest to come with it. That's fine. I click on X to slide it across. We're keeping the point of interest going with it as well. Okay. And now if I change the cone, maybe I want it to be a little bit higher. So let me go like this, a little bit like that. And now, though, I don't want the point of interest to go away. I like to keep it pointed there at the letters. So now I'm going to hold down the controller of the Command key when I move Y, and now it's going to be pointing down at the letters, but not at the trees. See how that works there? All right, let me just put the point of interest a little bit higher like this by grabbing that end. Now the cone is kind of narrow. That's where I want it to start, but we can have that change over time. Let me scroll down here a little bit. You'll see that the light options are down there. So I've got intensity and cone angle. Let's just keep that at 20 for now. And as the light comes up like this, I'm going to increase the cone angle a little bit, take in more of the background like that. I'm going to increase the intensity a little bit, bring it up somewhat like that. And I think I would take the point of interest up as well. Don't think I've keyframed that one, but I'll go back here and do a keyframe back here. And then if I go forward a little bit, we'll move that point there like that. If I go across the text. As it goes across the text, the cone is going to change in size like that. So you can have it increase in intensity in the middle, change its position, and toward the end you can drop the cone down in size and decrease in intensity. You can also adjust the radius and the fall-off distance. Now, radius says, again, how far will the light go till the fall-off begins? And then the fall-off says, how far will it fall off after that point? So if I drop the radius here, that's going to limit sort of the scope of the amount of light. Notice how it's dropping off the trees there in the distance. You can also control that just so it sort of focuses on the stuff in front and less on what's in back. If you want the fall-off distance to drop, you can drop that as well. And just kind of keep things inside this limited area. So that's just a basic rundown on some of the things you can think about as you adjust properties with lights and animate those properties.